So what really got me into men's coaching was a few different things actually, and it kind of just added its way up towards men's coaching. Through all my life, I've always enjoyed helping others and just supporting others. And then I came to realize it was more about the people I was helping. Things I was doing like volunteer work and other things, a lot of food bank or Habitat for Humanity things. It was great to work with my hands and do that, but it was the reactions of the people. And I was like, all right, I really enjoy seeing people and just a little bit of joy that sparked up from the help and support. And so it kind of progressed from there over the years, and then it took a long time to define it. And I came across life coaching. I saw some guys that were calling themselves coaches like 10 years ago. I was like, that's intriguing. And then I want to say about 3-4 years ago, I went down to Sedona and had a vision quest in a way. Yeah, not anything with drugs or anything, but just seeing man that called himself a dark lights shaman. So it was interesting, and he took me through a vision, and part of that vision was all the people I helped and successes with them, and what it looked like was mostly success through helping them find themselves, find their own grounding, and that probably go forward another year or so. Then I finally started into it, and I was like, okay, I see the gap with men. That's where I want to, change my focus towards. So this was about a couple years ago, and then a year ago, the real focus into diving into past and healing and the shadow side, that kind of work, was when my nephew took his own life. He was a 19-year-old, and really it changed even another trajectory on it. And that's when I saw all these men's groups from Connor Beaton, Trevor Boehm getting involved with that after that event, and seeing the power of connection, of opening up with other good men. And that's what was like, that's what I want to form more of, is good men out there. So that's really the raw, open answer to that, and where I am now.
What has been your perspective so far on like where all these problems are coming from? I have my own, and I'm sure everyone's got their own, but I've seen it as like people tend to pick like one thing, like, oh, it's just one problem. Oh, no, it's just one problem over here. Or if men would just do this, oh, the problem is this one. And it's a cascade of a number of different things that are kind of intersecting all kind of at the same time in a grotesque symphony, in a way, leading to a lot of guys having a lot of trouble. But what has been your experience so far with where it could be personal experience or it could be guys you worked with? Like, what's the crux of the issue is where it's coming from?
Sure. I mean, there are a lot of different paths, whether it's past things that have happened, hardships, traumas, whether it's family, society, or even just harshness of the environment of them getting raised, can cause a lot of different things. But the commonality, and I think coming from Dewey Freeman, is a lot of the fracture of attachment, and that attachment of the different steps that he talks about with, is my world okay? Am I okay? How much can I do of something? How well can I do of something? And then the last tier on the top, as you progress in age, who am I? And it's those fractures inside of those periods of time, from even what he describes as pre-birth all the way up to, I think it's in the 20s from the top.
Yeah.
I think all that had the common theme. And learning that from him, as well as through Connor and other folks, it makes sense that this can happen in a multitude of ways.
Yeah, the one that popped out in my head just now was the how much can I do? And I think it's interesting there's like a lot of things that pop into my head around this one, but I'll try and condense it because I don't want to go on a tangent if I don't. That nowadays I think there's I would say a direct and an indirect push towards discouraging men from really stepping out of their comfort zone
Mm.
and trying new things. And a big part of that, especially growing up, is like young boys, girls too, but generally speaking, a certain age, young boys, any parent that has a little boy or has had little boys knows what we're talking about, which is that they will just be like energetic psychos for like 12 hours a day and then just crash and then wake up and do it again. What's happening, among other things, during the time is that they're actually getting massive testosterone spikes throughout the day. They'll just go like super energetic, crazy, nuts, and that's from time to time, around the time when they're curious, they want to try new things, they want to explore. Maybe they're running around being what you might perceive as insane, rambunctious, energetic, uncontrollable. What's really happening is like that testosterone, in a way, is almost overriding their fear, overriding their uncertainty, to just say, let's go just see what stuff happens and just go try stuff and do stuff and just, I don't know, I'm just curious now, because that this testosterone among them is like it's pushing it up high enough to get them to go out and just do things. And there she goes. But a lot of times I see a lot of parents, and not to demean them, but a lot of mothers who will just say like, I don't understand why you're not more like your sister. Why are you more like the little girls over there? Why can't you just sit still and play nice? Why do you have to rough and tumble? Why do you have to be so crazy? Why can't you just relax? And it's just like, if you got shot with adrenaline every 2 hours like they do at that age, you'd want to run laps around the house too. But the more you suppress it, the more you try to push it down, the more they're going to internalize the sense of like, there must be something wrong with me because I feel like I'm energetic. And whenever I get this energetic feeling, also get a feeling of, I don't know, despair or like, guilt and remorse of like, oh, I'm not supposed to have this. I'm not supposed to. And then you get to these guys who basically say like they're fully grown. They say, I don't know how much I could do because I've been discouraged from stepping in my comfort zone so many times because I was too much as a kid growing up.
Yeah. Well, I think that also goes in hand, I mean, for both parents. We have this little bundle of energy.
Mhm.
And like you said, spikes throughout the day, and that's normal. That's a kid. That's being a kid. But I think the biggest part is parents, in a lot of ways, are missing the fact of, hey, right now I am doing this, but in 10 minutes, let me come play with you. We'll go play. We'll go do this. I don't think there is a healthy, somewhat of a boundary, but also a reassurance that, yes, we will go do this. It's just, why are you this way? Why is this? That's one explanation for it. There's also just the fact of setting a healthy boundary to say, hey, I'm washing the dishes right now. I'm working on the car right now, however you want to say it, between any parent. Give me 10 minutes. I will be right there, so that he understands that as
And
a little
even
boy.
I was going to say, just to tie in before we continue, is like, get your kids involved too. Like, I'm washing the dishes. You want to come help me? I'm working on a car. You want to come help me? Like, all he might do is just like hold a flashlight, or just like he might just have like a screwdriver in his hand. It's just like, oh my God, I'm holding the screwdriver. This is amazing. I'm with dad or with
Yeah.
mom doing something, whatever it is. Like, whatever they can tolerate doing, just have them kind of participate in doing it. And even if it kind of bugs you a little bit, it's the fucking world to them to know, like, I'm part of something bigger. I'm helping out. I'm learning stuff. I get to spend time with my mom and dad, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the beautiful part about kids is, in that moment, you are their entire world.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
They don't know that there is a whole world out there of so many different things that, as we grow up, we come to recognize. So right now, in this moment, and that's the beautiful part, is that this is my world. You are my world right now. And I want to play with you.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be rambunctious. I want to go explore this over here, and that's my world.
Yeah, and then what you get, like the darker half of that, is when we get these guys who grow up and they just, like you said with that structure with Dewey Freeman's thing, is that, is my world okay? No. Why not? Because I try to play and do fun things with mom and dad, and they assault me. Not say they assault, but they punish me for being who I am within reason. Obviously, I make the point of, like, letting kids, especially young boys, like, do stupid shit once in a while. and like let them learn on their own. Like, what if they run and scrape their knees? Like, they're not going to die. What if they run into traffic? Don't let them run into traffic. Like, there's a cutoff. Like, you should know when to not going to run with scissors, but maybe you'll run with your shoes untied in the backyard. You'll trip and fall, and like get a black eye or something like that, or a
Yeah.
bloody nose. Like, it's not going to kill you, but it's going to teach you a good lesson. But knowing where that line of what you can and can't do, and I think safetyism has become a massive problem for a lot of men in the past. I think it was a movement that started back in like the 1980s, something like that, where like parents just got like terrified of their kids getting. I think it started with. I have to look back into it. I think it started with a lot of the news cycle. That I remember hearing a statistic. It was something like the number of kidnappings and this and that, whatever it may be, actually has been dropping for quite a while, but the perception is way higher. And it's not that we shouldn't talk about the fact that something terrible happened, like someone got kidnapped or murdered. It happens, but more and more parents are just terrified to let their kids walk out the front door and just like play in their local neighborhood, or maybe they don't have a healthy neighborhood to play in the first place, or they don't want to interact with other kids or doing certain things, and they're overloading them with schoolwork and not getting enough time outside to just run around and just we say be kids, but in reality what they're doing is just expressing their own curiosity circuits at their own pace and learning things at their own pace through these interactions, doing dumb shit with each other. Yeah, and it's leading to a whole generation of men who are afraid of their own shadow on some level.
Yeah, I think there's quite a few different areas to explore there. I know just listening to a podcast recently by Connor Beaton, he put a statistic out there, and I can't remember where that statistic came from, but they're finding that it was 37% of the time is the only amount of time that you truly need, that a kid needs, of not something broken attachment wise or an interruption when growing up. So if you're worried, about hurting your kid because you're not giving them attention or saying no or this or that, yes, that could cause an interruption to say, well, I have my needs of food, getting motion, and physical touch are the top three things when you're very young. And let's say, hey, I want to play that motion side, actually moving. If you say no, but if you're saying yes for more than a third of the time when they need that, that's actually what they're finding that is still healthy. Because, you're not, when you're a parent, you're not going to be able to do 100% of the time. But if you're able to healthily put a boundary in a good way to say, hey, not right now, but we will here, and you follow through, I should say, with that. Because if you don't, that's another break. But you need to follow through. So it was quite interesting to say, no, it's not 100%. It's a little over a third of the time that you need to meet their needs and true needs. Because you have to figure out, what is it that you really need? Do you need one of those three things? If not, it's probably not something that, is more of a thing that they need for good, healthy attachment blueprints. So that's one factor to all that.
Yeah, I think nowadays there's a number of reasons why, but like parents are just overwhelmed trying to raise kids and also working full-time jobs, cost of the economy and things like that.
And
cost
that's
of living.
The safety aspect that comes into play is our own worries, things that we have because of something of our past comes into play there.
Like, in what context would you be referring to?
I
have some ideas. I'm just curious.
Yeah, there's the actual safety component, and because there is, society, don't let your kids do this. They'll be kidnapped. Don't let them outside alone, because this could happen. Could it? Very, very unlikely. But it's also it's what's the risk, really, when we think about it too? It's like when we deny them to play outside, what kind of things are we teaching them? Can't be with friends, can't trust anyone. And what does that grow up to? And that's a harder lesson. The other fact is the parent themselves probably has some of their own attachment interruptions. And you can also say that brings into family rules or the introjects that comes up. Introjects. Wow. There we go. That come up between, the explicit rule, the unknown rule, and the secret rule.
Can you run through the 4 rules real quick?
Yeah, and the fourth one is somatic, and that's related to the attachment one that we've been talking about. But the first one, basically, this is the known rule.
This is for context. This is like in a family dynamic, in a household.
Right.
If there's rules to the house, but sometimes we don't know what level, where they're at, and how explicit they are, and how it can affect you.
Right. And the rules can apply to other areas, religion, society, etc., etc. But purely talking about family right now. The first one of being known, it's like, I like the shoe example that I was given when I learned these. And it was, hey, you see the shoes are off outside. Someone tells you before entering someone's home, because you're about to enter someone's home, hey, please take your shoes off. That's the known rule. The unknown rule is, you may see signs. You see the people's shoes are off outside. You walk inside, you don't see anybody wearing shoes in the house. And if you ask, you may find out. But you also will be punished if you walk into the house with shoes on, not knowing. And that's to say, hey, you need to take your shoes off. The secret rule is, you don't see any shoes outside. You see other people potentially wearing shoes inside, but apparently you aren't allowed to wear shoes. And so the only way that you find out is you are punished of that. Now, of course, this can apply in positive manners in other ways, but purely for this exercise, this is just talking about some of those introjects or some of those negative sides that can happen. And then the somatic, this is stuff that's more like pre-verbal. Emotions, things that were felt, things that were ingrained into you. It's more or less going right back to Dewey's, attachment pyramid, that whole progress of everything. And it's not so much you'd be punished or anything like that, but more like it's just a felt experience. So somatic in a way that you just feel like maybe you don't belong. Or you weren't wanted, but nothing was said. That's the best way to describe it. There's, of course, longer definitions, but
well, the somatic rule is an interesting one. I think this popped up just now, is this idea that went on back in the 70s and 80s, I think it was, which apparently now that we're getting between this and the safetyism was just a terrible time period for parenting, apparently. There was the cry it out movement and generation. And I think there's been a lot of people who just thought like, yeah, you let your kids just cry until they pass out and they'll be fine. As long as once they start talking, then they'll actually be, actually have to set rules. But prior to that, they're empty slates. There's nothing going on in there. All they need is, food and be changed, and they're fine. It's all good. And turns out, no, actually, no, it's a big fucking deal that you actually really interact with your kids at a very, very young age and try to do your best to take care of them as much as possible. Like the physical interaction. So cry it out essentially meant like when they start crying, let them wear themselves out. And it may be there's like false alarms. Maybe like, it starts crying for like 5-10 seconds and then it just stops. And it's more like, I'm bored. But, I'll entertain. At 10 seconds of no response, I'll entertain myself. Whatever. Like as a baby, as a toddler. But if it's like 30, 45 seconds plus and they're still going, it's like, okay, something probably is wrong now. Let me go just check on them, make sure they're okay. And for whatever reason, it may be in that case that they genuinely just got spooked by something. They want some attention. They feel the need for it to be like, hugged and touched and, held and whatever. And then a lot of parents have basically said like, no, just let them go. They're fine. Let them just cry until they can cry no more. But what ends up happening in that regard is that your nervous system is like, okay, note to self, people might not come for me if I'm upset, if I have a problem. And you turn into a full-grown adult and you're like, I just don't feel like anybody's going to give a shit about me. I just feel like if I have a problem, I shouldn't tell anyone about it. I have to just keep it in. Where did this come from? Like, well, my parents are pretty good growing up as I remember. Well, pre-verbal, it's possible that you were just like quite literally neglected as a baby and your nervous system just wired in like, maybe am I going to be safe? Is this world safe? Am I safe? Am I okay?
So with the whole cry it out movement, it was actually dismissed as not really the best thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, yes, if 5-10 seconds, that's not even enough time to walk up to where they are and if they stop. But what I was finding was people started having these somatic experiences, like, I'm not going to get my needs met, and either, I'm just going to shut down or rage. And that's a whole part of that, pattern of getting the movement, the physical touch, or food. And usually it's one of those three that a child needs, especially when they're crying and pre-verbal. And if you were neglected constantly, I mean, if you let a kid cry once, it's probably not going to have detrimental effects. But if you're there, come and get them when they do, they're going to continue to feel that reinforcement, that over that 37% time if you're there and meeting their needs. What I think the hardest part with the interjects, the rules, that somatic experience, and men not understanding that something may have happened when they were a kid that was constantly not being met. Because of, once again, family, society, etc. It could be a lot of different factors. It could be even just, the world when they come out. If they're not allowed to go attached to their mom very quickly, and maybe something happened to them that they had to go into prenatal care, and now they're in an incubator box for several weeks. That's probably a terrifying experience.
I can actually talk to that from a science perspective, but yeah.
And so that's that somatic experience that we have to also try to heal as best we can to, and dive into and touch. And that's, I think, a big miss as well. Therapy is great, but I think there's also still a large gap in today's society of touching deep into actual storage of where the emotions are, especially the men. And men are very good at hiding and stuffing down emotions and not expressing it.
We are ninjas with emotions. You'll never see it coming.
Yeah. And I'm guilty as charged.
Oh yeah, same here.
Yeah.
You mentioned before about the baby in the incubator and things like that. There actually have been studies showing how, well, that's not even the studies. There are studies, yes, but there's also a famous case. I had to find the exact information. I referenced it a few times. It was an orphanage, I think in somewhere in Eastern Europe or Russia back in the 1960s, 70s, something like that. That they were trying to essentially, to the best of their ability, try to consolidate as many orphans, unwanted babies, like little tiny babies, whatever it was, to just this one hospital, this orphanage hospital set up. And they had the setup set up such that all the kids had enough food, they had enough to, they had enough clothing, that they were warm, they had their own bed. They didn't have enough staff to actually pick them up and hold them and rock them and talk to them when they were really little. And a good handful of the babies died. If not, a lot of them were malnourished, they weren't growing as effectively. There's even been studies showing how with I think it was with rats, they've tried taking out aspects of what they would have in the developmental process. So newborn rat or mouse is born, they'll leave mom, but they'll take away the frequency of food, or they'll leave the food, but they'll take away mom, or they'll leave they won't do any kind of playtime, and then they'll leave mom and the food, and they'll just see what happens. And one thing they noticed with some of the rats was if you take away mom or the other rats, they don't socialize, they don't grow as well. But if 3 to 4 times a day you just stick your hand in the cage and just pet them, just make physical contact with them, and leave the food, they grow dramatically, the way they should be.
Yeah.
And there's a number of times I've shown these studies where basically it's you can't discount the importance of physical contact for babies, for what it's telling their nervous system and their body to do, because otherwise when you take that away, and in some cases neonatal, traumatic pregnancy, childbirth, crazy complications, it's an exception of course, but the importance, especially when they're really little, of getting that signal from their parents or from some kind of caregiver that I'm here if you need me. How do I tell that to my baby? You hold them. You talk to them. You stay calm while they're freaking out. You calm them down when they're freaking out, and they start to wire into their nervous system like, okay, if I'm upset, somebody's going to be here. And if you don't get that, they'll have lifelong issues, malnourishment. There's a big thing with the we talked about rough and tumble play briefly, that if you don't let rats socialize at below a certain age, that they'll actually develop like socialization issues when they reach fully grown maturity, which for rats is like 2 weeks. Like first rats are being born. For human beings, it's like 5-10 years. It's a bit different. But they've displayed signs of ADD, displays of anxiety problems. Their cortisol levels are spiked, things like that. If they didn't get healthy interactions with like some kind of mother or with other rats to like interact with and play at that critical age, like they're fucked up. They have a hard time like functioning.
Yeah.
Same thing with young men.
Yeah.
Little boys. Yeah.
And to expand upon that a little bit more, especially with humans, it's actually becoming more known that the right side of the brain grows faster and quicker than the left side of the brain as babies and toddlers. And the right side brain is being more and more linked to emotions and feelings. So you literally, when you have a baby, you have this bundle of nerves and emotions, and that's all it's going to feel. So when you hold it, move them, or they move, they get food, all that, is a very nervous system like response.
Mm-hmm.
And emotions are highly tied to it. So when something isn't met, an emotion can be tied to it. If it's constantly not met, that's when that issues start to come up, because a constant emotion keeps appearing with this. It's, I'm not getting touched right now. I'm crying. I'm not getting touched, so I shut down. And that shutdown becomes more and more prevalent as that is not throughout their life or throughout their young life met. And so all they can feel is, I won't get my needs met. And you can imagine the issues that can start to come up as they grow up. And boys, as an opinion, I think are probably less cared for, in a sense. They're like, go out and play, go do that, not going to go cry, go over there and take care of your own thing, go be over there, instead of, hey, come here, I got you, let's go play, let's go do this. There's a bigger hit there. I'm not saying that it's a big leap between boys and girls, but it probably does have a little bit more of a side, just more in the opinion of mine.
There was studies done talking about the response time and the types of responses that new mothers would have towards baby boys and baby girls when they were crying. And I think they would ask the mothers, I think it was like the kid would start crying and they'd ask the mother, like, what's the first thing that came to mind just now? Or like, what would they say? Or how long would they take on average to respond? And if it was a baby girl who's crying, like, it was like, oh my God, it has to be something wrong. I need to take care of it. Like, go crazy. If it was a boy, like, just give him a few seconds to see if he calms down. He should be fine. Like, there was something just socially that was kind of cooked into us, saying like they should be able to take care of themselves. They're boys; they can handle it. Which, granted, past a certain age, you do want to start teaching your boys and your girls to be a little more self-sufficient. But below a certain age, like, they are completely reliant on you, socially, emotionally, nervous system. Like you said, getting needs met. I had a thought and I just lost it. Hold on. Emotions. That's a big one. I think as guys, especially today, like when I mention the word emotion, most guys are like, oh, you mean crying? That's what girls do. Men don't cry. Men don't have emotions. And I think what's being missed is what emotions actually are. That there's a perception of like women cry because they feel, men don't feel. What are feelings of other than just stupid things? Like, no, emotions are basically just your body's attempt at communicating with you that it picked up something wrong either internally or externally in your environment, and it's trying to tell you something, or maybe something's internally going on. It can maybe be difficult to go through, a little bit painful. It's causing some kind of response. It's also trying to signal to other people something's happening right now. Could be funny, could be sad, could be scary, could be anger worthy, whatever it may be. And when you start to really look at it through that perspective, I think it's a lot healthier to say like, okay, if I'm angry or if I'm scared, if I'm nervous, if I'm anxious, my body's telling me that I saw something that I didn't notice that I saw, but I need to just kind of signal other people, like, does anybody else see what's going on here? Am I the only one, or should I feel a certain way? So, and this is a big one. I think when you see, I forget who did it, but there's a study. It's called social referencing. I'm fascinated by this. I love this. It's like when a little baby sees something brand new, and oftentimes the first thing they'll do is look up at their parent. Like if they're sitting in the parent's lap, they'd be like, "What the hell is that? How am I supposed to respond?" And they're kind of looking, saying like, if you're smiling, I'll start be curious and smiling too. If you look freaked out, you say, "Oh my God, holy crap, what is that?" They'll immediately freak out too. Like they don't know, everything is brand new. So in a way, it's like, especially with little kids, like you're using your emotions to signal to them certain things about what's going on. If it's like, it's okay, we can calm down. It's not okay, we need to freak out and run, whatever it is, without pre-verbal, like I said. And maybe there's an impression with guys that once you grow up to a certain age, then it's just purely words. There's no emotions left. You don't need emotions. It's just words. We just talk. We just talk and talk and talk and be logical and all that stuff. But even there's plenty of studies showing how, like, even if you can't identify that you're feeling something or having an emotion, it doesn't mean it's not still happening in your head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, majority of guys will sidestep. They'll just add more logic. They will add more things to try, say, I think it might be this, or it might be this, but they're not actually trying to feel what's there. And it happens a lot. It's that, thick layer of skin they feel like they had to put on this thick layer of logic, and everything else got stuffed down or pushed somewhere else because they start feeling they might have to show emotion. They might have to express it, and that can be scary for a lot of men. And they express, and it's not just negative. Joy, happiness, wonder, excitement, nervousness. All these are also emotions. And I think they're forgotten too. I think we know sad and anger.
Yeah, that's one thing I said. Like, men are notorious for transmuting their emotions.
Yeah.
It's like, it's like, what emotions do guys have? I'm angry, I'm horny, I don't really give a shit. That's about it. For most men, not realizing, like, no, it's actually a variety of things. And at least the way I frame it, maybe you have a little bit of a different perspective on this, is that it tends to be that when you're having an emotion come up, it's usually not alone. It's usually like something else underneath it. But what you can see, and it's almost like your brain can only, your conscious mind can only focus on one thing at a time. So if you have 3 different emotions that pop up, like I'm pissed off, I feel shame, I feel embarrassment and grief, the biggest one is the one you're going to see actively in your mind, but you don't realize this is sitting right behind it. And it might be that like you're angry because you're feeling vulnerable, which is where the shame and the guilt and embarrassment might be coming from. But more, what are you feeling right now? Just angry. Anything else? Nope, just angry. Because that's all I can see right now, because it's the biggest one on my mind right now.
Yeah.
And then when you work with guys and you say, like, okay, take a deep breath, let the anger, calm down a little bit. Now what do you see? Like, oh, I have this pitted feeling in my stomach. Ugh. My chest feels tight. I feel like there's a lump in my throat. Am I still angry? Like, no, it's something else. It's probably something else in there going on.
Yeah.
But there's things I could talk to, but I'm just curious your thoughts on that.
I mean, just playing right into that, it's what's behind the anger a lot of times. Or what's behind the quietness, the shutdown.
The stone wall.
Yeah. So when we actually dig behind it, there's usually a lot of shame, sadness that they're trying to prevent from coming out. Because a lot of ways, men probably don't feel that they can handle it initially.
Yeah.
Feel that way.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is, your heart, your soul, spirit, whatever you want to call it, absolutely can. I think it's the image of going through that is the hardest. Everything pre going into it.
I'm writing down notes as they come to me so I don't forget them. Yeah. Handling emotions is a big one, and a big component of it is this misunderstanding that you really need. I think it's the way we're wired. I think there's a whole evolutionary purpose for it, that we were very, very, very interdependent creatures. The lone wolf is a complete friggin' myth. Like, even a lot of people, it's a good example. It's like people will look at successful people in the world. They'll look at Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, whoever you want to, like Tim Cook, and think like that guy did all that by himself. How the hell, man? I wish I could be like, that's amazing. Not realizing like, no, that company has like tens of thousands of hundreds of thousands of employees, followed by all the mentors they had along the way, the people that helped support them get there and whatnot. And this idea, like even behind handling emotions, is like we're not really supposed to be digesting emotions in isolation.
No.
Like realistically, your brain does not like to let its guard down unless it knows you're safe. And safety tends to subconsciously show up in the form of, is there somebody else near, same thing as being a child, being a baby, somebody else nearby that could take care of me while I'm going through this and keep me safe. Like you're not like going to be like grieving a loss while running away from a lion. Like your brain can't do both at the same time. But I think there's something to that idea that a lot of men have. Well, there is something to that idea. A lot of men have this perception, having grown up, basically saying like, you're allowed to be angry and you're allowed to be happy, nothing else. Why? Because mom and dad can't handle it. And there's even reasons as to why parents in the past few generations have having a hard time dealing with their emotions, which we'll touch on in a second. But there is an important lesson in the idea that, I love this quote. It's like, shame needs a witness.
Yeah.
Like there's something deep about just being able to say what you're feeling to somebody else and not seeing them respond the way you think they're going to respond. You're not going to believe this, but you're going to hate me when I say this, but, and you're like, no, just say it.
Yeah.
Well, I did this one terrible thing. I'm like, okay. And then you're like, wait, why aren't you like judging and criticizing me? And I feel terrible. Why don't you treat me like crap? It's like, because you're human. It's okay. And then they have to like reframe what they were feeling. I thought I was a bad person this whole time, but you're telling me I'm not? What? But you can't do that in isolation. Your brain will just keep like whatever that voice is, that those opinions, those traumas were, will just keep reiterating like, no, you are a bad person. Why? Because that's the way it's always been. Why would it be any different? Until somebody externally comes along and says like, I heard what you had to say and you're not a bad person. You're like, oh shit, now I've got conflicting opinions I got to try to figure out.
And no, I mean, I wholeheartedly agree that grief, sadness, shame, even anger that we have, that we need to express, needs to be seen. And the biggest gap right now in men and society is allowing other men to do that in front of you. And because a lot of distractions will come up. Oh, we'll talk about sports. We'll talk about what the weather was today or some crazy thing I did. And instead of saying, man, I was hit hard today. This came up for me. And this is really what I was feeling. This was a strong motion of a wave of sadness that came over me. And I just don't know how to handle it right now. We don't have that kind of conversation as much. And that is the biggest gap, is men not supporting men.
Competition. The sense of competition, the sense of needing to maintain status and reputation and perceived competence. We've never seen him cry a day in his life. Like, oh, he must be really good at what he does. Like, or he's just bottling it up.
But it's such a farce.
Yeah.
It is exactly the opposite to me. If you're not willing to open up to that, it's, it shows that you aren't to that level of capability. It means that you are afraid, and that's different. And I'm not saying I'm going around just saying that to everybody, but no, it's actually fear too that comes into play. I'm fearful of what this man in front of me is going to react if I say this or that. I fear if I display emotion, he's going to react differently, or even she, like if you're in a relationship or in front of someone else, there's fear in expression. And that's partly due to nature, society, religion coming into play in a lot of ways. And friends.
Yeah.
So, if you're looking to improve, you got to look at your friends too and see, are these friends going to be supportive?
Twofold, yeah. One is like, are my friends going to be supportive? But also, even if they were, could I let myself be vulnerable in front of them? Because I can think of guys literally right now who are just like, if they came to me and spilled their heart, I would just hug them to death. But I'm convinced they're thinking I'm going to call them a piece of shit and loser. Just, wow, you have problems? And yeah, like, no, I would, like, I know they have problems. I know they're having a hard time. And I know they don't want to talk about it because they're convinced, like, oh my God, I'm going to judge, I'm going to this, I'm going to that. I'm like, total opposite. But that's not me saying as them feeling like that's what I'm saying. It's very difficult to get guys to reconcile, like recognize, like I'm not going to judge you. Like I understand what you're going through. Like you're human. We're not all fucking Superman. And even Superman has problems.
It's true.
The other part with the emotions thing, handling emotions, there's two parts I can think of. One is a big narrative I see around on the internet a lot about how women can't handle men's emotions, and two is parents not modeling growing up. And my own perspective on this is mostly World War II / globalization, industrial era, that there was so much craziness going on back in the day in terms of just like growth and economic development, the post-economic boom of World War II when it had to do recovery and globalization and everything like that, the Geneva Conventions and all that good stuff. And everyone was just like, it was like working. It was just like, go to work. Just go to work. You don't got to deal with your problems. Just go to work, make a ton of money. Life just gets better if you keep making more money. Make more money. Go have a family. Don't worry about your problems.
Was
Go
that the
hide
silent?
away. What's up?
Was that the silent generation?
I believe so. They
Yeah.
were the precursor to the baby boomers.
Yeah.
And I think that I had to look into like the silent was like they just kept their heads down and kept working. But it's like it also implies like there's a lot of undigested stress there that they didn't digest properly, and they showed their kids like we don't cry, we don't whine, we just keep working.
Yeah.
And it's like it's okay to say like we work our asses off, but we also spend 5-10 minutes to let our feelings out once in a while, just to kind of reset and decompress. And there is something I've got some friends who have immigrant parents, and it's a very similar mentality of like because they came here with very little, not as much as they could have, and they just worked their nuts off trying to survive. And then a lot of it was like, you got problems, shut up, keep working.
Yeah.
And even to this day, I've had conversations with them saying like, they're like, yeah, I'm doing well because they give me a good work ethic, but I don't know how to connect to them emotionally. I don't know what the hell to say, what to do. And you see this sometimes, I think, with parents who might say something like when the kids try to come to them and talk to them about what it was like growing up or emotions or this, and like, why do you bring up the past? Or, oh, suddenly I'm busy. I got to do something else. Look at that. I'm so conveniently busy as soon as you ask me about my feelings. Look at that. Or they just literally have no idea how to. And this kind of points to this idea of, I'm fascinated with, it's like alexithymia. Familiar with that?
Don't believe so.
There's different variations and we'll say grades of it as far as I know, but the general term alexithymia is a fancy technical term for emotional color blindness. And a lot of men, you say, how are you feeling? I don't know. Like, you're feeling something though. Like, am I? I don't know. I really like, all right, your house just exploded. Your wife just died. Your dog ran away. You're bankrupt. How do you feel? Like, life happens. I don't know. Like, there's something there, but you literally can't see it or feel it.
So you're basically emotionally constipated.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but even even in the case of constipation, sometimes it's like, well, I could feel my stomach hurts, but even in this case, it's like I don't even know like what I'm feeling. I experienced this once, and I'll just say it flat out with my father. And something pretty crazy to him happened. I went to go talk to him the day of, and he was just like venting, but no emotion behind it, just talking. And at the very end, I said like, "How do you feel? Like, how you feeling right now?" And he's like, "Honestly, just numb. I don't really feel anything." That's very common for a lot of guys, but it's almost like an emotional overwhelm. It's like
Yeah.
an internal shutdown mechanism that happens. It could be in your childhood, could be something happened in your teen years later on. At some point, like something like a blockage just hit your system because it was too much to handle. And it could have been consistency over a period of time, or it could have been one big event. And you don't realize how much it's like everything after that point was just like plugged away, shoved away, repressed. And you just go about your day to day life thinking, I'm fine. I don't feel anything. I'm totally fine. I'm fine. I just don't feel anything. And then one day you just explode.
Yeah. And I think kind of to a point I was alluding to earlier, a lot of men don't feel like they have the capacity to go and and bury this. They don't feel like it could be handled, that they can handle it.
Or if somebody else can handle it, yeah.
Or somebody else can witness it as they handle it. And I think that is a big stopping factor. It stops a lot of people from processing things that they feel that they had happen, a traumatic experience or some kind of interruption that happened in their life, or the loss of someone, and it can sit there for years. And can eat away at you. It can literally can cause illness, and just erode your mental state over time. But I do know, and I do want to say to anyone out there, is that you absolutely have the capability of diving into this. And it is the thought of diving into it that is the scariest. It's not the actual work.
Yes.
It's a bit of work, but it's really not as scary as you really think, and you can absolutely handle this.
It's ripping off a Band-Aid.
Yeah.
It's jumping into a cold pool.
Yeah.
It's just like the perception around it is really more dramatic than it actually is. And I think there's something interesting to know when it comes to like neuroscience and things like that. It's like unless this ties back into unless it was demonstrated to you by your parents in your childhood, your brain really only operates for the most part on what it's experienced. So if something new comes along you've never experienced, if you had enough time in your childhood to explore your feeling of curiosity, something brand new will intrigue you. If you've had a childhood of just trying to play defensiveness and safe and constantly feeling like you're under threat, could be your parents or emotional volatility, could be that you just had, tumultuous home environment, whatever it may be, your natural reaction might be, "Ooh, what is this? Let me just take a chance." Like me personally, I tend to be a bit more risk averse, but I'm trying to do. I'm well aware it's because growing up, I had a bit of a crazy, hectic household, and I kind of recluded and became recluse into like video games and things I would do growing up. But in that regard, even with men feeling like they can't do those things, it's quite literally because you've never done it before. It's brand new. It's totally new territory. And if you didn't have parents that demonstrated and modeled that growing up, your brain's going to basically say, well, let me look in the archives. Like, I don't see anything in the back of your brain saying we've ever done this before. So A, how do I know it's going to work? B, how do I know it's not going to kill me or do something bad to me?
Right.
C, how do I know it's not going to ruin my reputation or something like that? What if it messes with my job? What if it messes with my relationship? What about it's like all these things? And it's like, the point to that is almost like, is your life compounding the way you want it to be? It's like, well, my relationships aren't great. My job kind of sucks. But at the same time, I'm really afraid of like dealing with his old trauma. It's like, you can continue doing the crap you're doing now and it's get the exact same results, or take the chance, dive into your past, see where this bottleneck is, where this emotional constipation is, uncork it, get it out of your system, and then see who the hell you are afterwards. And then I guarantee from then you'll have a much broader and better and brighter perspective moving forward. But a lot of, like I said, fear of having never done it before. No one's ever modeled it to me before.
That's another interesting area that you made me think of. When you're talking about see who you are behind it. And as you are doing this work, something I've noticed with a couple of my clients is they start not to recognize themselves at the moment because they haven't taken time to realize who they are now. And I think that's also an important step. While you're doing this work is, 3-6 months, however long you've been doing this, if you have been doing the work, if you are out there listening to this, do a self-check with yourself. See who you are. Write that down. Write down your new core values that you probably have. Write down the new things that is your self and identity. Because I bet you it's changed a bit. Because it's not that it's changed who you are. You're just becoming a more complete version of who you are. Because
more integrated,
that heart behind all this, that heart that was stuffed down, may have been found, or maybe parts of it have started being collected. You're still collecting some more pieces, and that's all going to add to you.
I have a buddy of mine who is artistic, not autistic, artistic, but he doesn't do it much. And I think a big part of it is the fact that I think in his household growing up, that kind of like nuanced, abstract expression of things was not considered just like manly. It wasn't considered productive. It's not going to lead to like a job they could do. And I've seen him do like art once in a while. He's got a knack for it. He's got a talent, but he just like, I can see how much he fucking enjoys it. And even if he's not like Picasso, he just tries it. But I've seen him kind of fluctuate over the years, and I always wonder, like, I wonder if there really is just like an artist underneath there, like underneath that like iron, like hardcore ironclad, big tough guy. It's like, man, you just like drawing paintings. That's what you like to do. You like to just something like that, and just see if you can like mimic this and try different colors. very similar. I think you said before, you'll see guys who just, they get to a point when they're just like, I don't know who I am. It's like, well, there's someone in there who is you. It's just been buried down for a really fucking long time. And it's going to be a little weird for you to say, like, in a way, almost grieving the version of yourself that you created to survive, to make room for the new version of yourself that is now thriving, that is much more authentic to what you are, who you are, what you like to do. Like me personally, I think for a long time, I've just always had a bit of a competitive itch to me. But at some point, I must have started burying it in the past like 5-10 years and just feeling like, I should. But every time I get into a new activity that had some element of like, I could win, I could be better at this, I'm just like, here we fucking go. I want to first place, bro. God, let's do this. To try to like iron out as much space of like, if I lost, how much of it was random variance versus how much I could actually improve on by learning something new. And I would pour my heart and soul into those activities. But at some point, I kind of just like buried it down a little bit, and I started to, over the past couple of years, kind of realize like I haven't had the same like excitement towards things. I've kind of been a little bit like lackluster towards things I wanted to do and try. And then recently, when I kind of said, like, you know what, just lean into it. Like, it's a whole other part, like, energy just starts coming up out of nowhere. But it really is more authentic. Like, I just like competing. It's totally fine. When I was younger, I was a sore loser. It was a whole other story. But now I'm much better about being like, okay, I won, awesome. I lost, I have something to improve on for next time. And I like that process. It's a fun process to go through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the Japanese art of taking broken pottery?
Kintsugi, I think it is.
Yeah, that's it. So that's actually the process you're going through, because not only are you finding these pieces of you, and like your friend the artist, finding more about him being the artist, but he's also mending himself back together with gold.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've ever seen, I mean, they do it purposefully too, but if you've seen some of those pots or other cups that they repaired, the brokenness makes it more beautiful with that gold. And because it's a real authentic portion of you, all those pieces of you put back together.
Kintsugi, yeah, I just Googled it. Golden translate to golden joinery or golden repair. Kintsukuroi? I don't know. Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Powdered gold, silver, platinum. Yeah. I know I've heard a story about guys who built a lot of their lives and their careers around this persona that they created. And then when you come along and say, like, well, we might have to actually like do some grieving, do some shame release, kind of figure out who you really are. And they go, like, what if like I lose everything I built so far? What if that? And it's like, well, did you really want it in the first place? Because this wasn't really you.
Yeah.
Within a healthy range, a healthy degree, but yeah, just having the space, like I said before, like grieving for who you really are, like who you were, giving space for you, because you really can't. I had this thought a couple of weeks ago. It's like it's almost like Highlander. There can only be one. Like you really can't have. You can have multiple personas, but energetically, mentally, it is taxing to pretend to be 10 different people depending on 10 different environments, and that could fluctuate a little bit depending on what environment you're in. It's like if you're a comedian but you're at a funeral, like maybe keep the jokes to yourself just for a few hours. But in general, not being afraid to just be yourself to the best of your ability wherever you are, so you don't have to keep cycling through who do I have to be wherever I am.
Well, let's go back to that analogy, the broken cup. You know, you have a person who thinks, oh, yeah, you know, I have all this success and all that, but if your cup has some piece broken off of it, especially towards the top, you're not going to be able to fill your cup all the way. It's going to keep leaking out the side until that piece is back. And so that you can call it the cup of fulfillment of life. You're never going to truly feel fulfilled. And that something's always missing because it's constantly leaking out the side as you try to fill it.
Poetic.
I can come up with some random ones.
That just a fulfillment thing. I think for men, women too, but in the case of men, looking at the perspective of fulfillment versus happiness, and I think my suspicion is a lot of men chase certain things that are numbing certain discomforts they're feeling, and then saying that they feel happy when in reality, fulfillment is usually on the other side of some uncomfortable things, but you'll be appreciative. I notice this all the time with working out. It's like if I'm back in the gym on a consistent basis for like 2-3 months, the first month I'm like, I don't want to be here. I'm tired. I'm this and that. The bed is really comfy. I look like crap. That guy's got bigger biceps than me. That guy's got a six pack. I still got a gut. What the hell? By month 3, am I starting to see like my arms fill in? My strength is going up. I'm just like, I feel so good that I did this. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I'm so glad I endured that discomfort and pain to become who I am now. And even in this case of the men's work, like letting go of that shame, letting go of that guilt, letting go of those things, figuring out who you really are authentically, not being afraid, letting go of the nice guy, you get a sense of fulfillment that just automatically generates happiness. Not just trying to chase happiness, but like now you're fulfilled and the happiness just comes right on top of it naturally.
I think it's actually, this might be a good place where we review steps starting to get there.
Step 1.
Step 1.
Step 1, cry your eyes out. Step
Cry
2.
Just explode with emotions. No. I mean, just a few things, like maybe not steps, but maybe just more places to think about starting if you haven't started or continuing. And some of the things, like first off is, find somebody in your life that you can be open with, that you can explore this with you, whether that's a coach, a really good therapist, good friend, whoever they might be. But start looking into that. Start looking into some of the shadow work. If you put that into Google, you'll probably find a bunch of resources back. So there's a lot of different things you can follow, programs out there. So it's just start the process. Don't be afraid of it.
Be humble about the steps you can take too.
Yeah.
Like you're not going to find enlightenment in a day. It's going to take some time.
It will take time. Healing takes time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's probably going to take more time than you're comfortable with or than you think. And if a coach promises you can heal within 2 weeks, probably not a good coach or therapist. But really find one that will dive more into the somatic body, not just have a logical conversation with you. If I, third session with coach or whoever, if you aren't feeling things into your body, or they're not trying to, or they're just still constantly having a logical level of conversation with you, you might want to start looking for a new one. So that's a little tip, but start there, start from the base, the bottom, and understand, who am I now? Where is the shadow that I cast inside myself? And what has been casted into this shadow? And I like to say, what even guards the shadow? And I say that because there are things that, as you start to explore yourself, that will come up: reactions, emotions, things that are going to try to stop you from feeling emotions. So these guardians that are there need to also be talked with and also bypassed. You don't need to take them down, per se. They need to be understood why they are there.
Mm-hmm.
That will allow you to have power to go beyond. And once you're able to find, whether, you call it your inner child, another piece of you, that's the person you want to get to know more. Dive into that person, understand them and why they're there, and how to start reintegrating this piece of you back into you. That's probably the biggest first step to get into, in areas to progress towards.
Yeah, you said the word bypass, but I think it's a good perspective to understand that this is like the channel. This is the coaching intention for myself. It's like the adaptive male, and the idea is like we are ridiculously adaptive creatures. Mm-hmm. And we can adapt to crazy environments, crazy conditions. We can go to Antarctica. We can go underwater, thousands of feet and under crazy pressures. We can go to outer space. We'll figure it out. But also internally, on an individual basis, we can adapt to just about any household, family dynamic, and society and culture we get into if given enough time. But sometimes those adaptations become maladaptive adaptations. And like I said before, these guardians, it's like, maybe you were an ambitious, perfect example is me. Like when I was growing up, I was notoriously shy. And everyone just thought, oh, he's just shy. He's just quiet. He's just what he does. When in reality, I think it was a combination of just hectic child household stressors going on, that it wasn't until like college, or like really when I started doing massage therapy, that I was just like, wow, I can't stop friggin' talking. Oh my God. Like I literally can't shut up. And I know you know this firsthand from talking to me plenty. Like I literally can't stop talking. And it makes the question of like, well, where did that shyness guardian come from? Like what condition did you have to be in to actually, like, because your body will say like, I have to create something to get you to be safe, aka a maladaptation, to protect you in this environment. And then that at some point you have to recognize those adaptations that you had developed and those guardians you developed, however you want to frame it, they were helpful at the time, but they're not helpful anymore.
Yeah.
And you have to like you have to give them permission to like lower their guard and just calm down and relax a little bit.
I like to say even you can reform them. Because technically they're a bit of your ego. And your ego, you know, as well as I do, you can't kill it. You can't kill your ego. It only comes back nastier and stronger if you try. But you can reform your ego. You can create it into something positive where it cheers you on more. Because, and I believe Connor and Jung allude to it, is it as the loyal soldier. And these bits of your ego or guardians that come up is be shy. You don't want to be loud. You don't want to be hurt. Something bad could happen.
Mm-hmm.
That happens. And behind that ego, that guardian, is a peace. No,
Absolutely.
I'm a talker. I love talking. I love stating facts and all that. And that's a quality I adore about you, actually.
Thank you.
No, you have a lot of facts, and I love it. But there are times I will cut you off. But that's a piece.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how we need to reform this guardian into something that will allow us to continue to say, yeah, actually, go grab this piece of you.
Mm-hmm.
Go say what you need to.
I notice it a lot during massages. A lot of my patients love to have like long form, hour-long conversations with me about all these topics. But once in a while, I do have patients who are just like, I just like to just be quiet. And it's like the worst hour of my life every single time. I'm just like, oh my God, I want to sit. And I'll just be sitting there just like having conversations and thoughts around ideas and opinions and bridging things together and thinking about future. I just can't, even in here, I can't stop talking, basically. But yeah, finding that element, that part of yourself that just likes to be, maybe you're emotionally expressive, maybe you're theatrical, you're musical, you're curious, you're ambitious, whatever it is that you like to do, that oftentimes like it's kind of hiding in there somewhere, somehow, because of something in the past. But the problem is your brain does not know that threat is not there anymore. And I hear this a lot with people I've talked to, especially like around, I get a lot of women for massage therapy and they'll talk about their husbands. And sometimes I've had patients who will say like, how is he this old, 40, 50, 60 something years old, and he still acts this way, or hasn't learned this thing, or still brings up this problem? And to them, it's almost like, I think a lot of people, there's this idea of like maturity just gets like a download from the universe, or like whatever old traumatic events that happened in the past, once they're physically out of the way, they're gone. You're fine. It's okay. But in reality, your brain we haven't evolved enough yet, we'll say, that we can just let it go. Because reality is the conditions in which we evolved into. It's like, you really, if something came close to threatening you, endangering your life of any sort, your brain's like, never forget this. Because if it happens again and you could die next time, I'm never going to let you forget. That's essentially the framework of emotions in general. So like part of it is just, fun fact, some neuroscience. A big part of the challenge is very difficult for people to get to change, is because there is a reluctance to let themselves be emotional and to connect to that emotionality in the first place. So step one tends to be, like we talk about, like letting yourself getting back into your body. But the behavior patterns, the neurological loops, the neurons, whatever you want to call it, your brain really can't do anything to affect them unless it gets a sufficiently large enough emotional stimulus to override. So you see this a lot with people who are like, they're smokers and they got a lung cancer diagnosis, and holy shit, I'm going to stop smoking tomorrow, cold turkey. Like, I'm overweight and I eat crap and I just got type 2 diabetes. I need to start taking myself now. It's like, well, why didn't you do it before? It's like, because the emotional stimulus, there wasn't a big enough one to hit. I had my uncle years ago. He was notorious for smoking, and his girlfriend at the time got like lung cancer, emphysema, everything you could think of. Like, she passed away about 15 years ago. And like 3 days after she died, he quit cold turkey and never started ever again. He just like scared the shit out of him. And there is a benefit to emotional events in childhood to kind of make sure don't run into traffic, whatever you may do. Like, it's like doing those little things. When it comes to even the men's work and the shadow work and things like that, it's like you need to be able to let yourself experience the emotion. Otherwise, we cannot get these barriers or these behavior loops to actually change because you haven't had a sufficient enough stimulus to actually like override the behavior mechanism in your head. That's how emotions work. So you actually have to let yourself be emotional in order to change. It's where that phrase, the only way out is through, kind of comes from. You have to go through it. As painful as it is, the only way to like break that pattern, overwhelm those neurons, whatever it may be, to break and make new ones is a heavy emotional stimulus.
Yeah. Another component too to think about that is what else could generate an emotional stimulus. How about knowing exactly where you want to go?
Excitement, anticipation.
Yeah, that's one part. I think doing trauma work, attachment work, interruptions, all this stuff in the past we forget. We also need to look forward and envision where we want to go and who we are. And we forget ourselves too when we envision this. A lot of people say, oh, I have a vision of a big house and lots of money and cars. It's like, yeah, but what about you? What would actually get you to fill that cup all the way? And that's the question you should ask when the things that you want to progress towards. Do you see yourself as a smoker still?
Identity. Yeah.
Do you see that? If you have a powerful enough vision, it probably could generate enough to just cause you to say, all right, I know I need to quit. And that could give you enough emphasis as well.
Yeah. I remember when I was younger, one of the best things someone recommended to me was to try to do a lot of traveling, just so you can get an idea of like what's actually out there, and then decide from there, after having seen enough things, what do you really want? What are you working towards? What's your future goal? Whatever it may be. But yeah, like that. Sometimes it's a matter of creating something to move towards and then something you're running away from. It's like, I'm looking forward to being in shape, but I'm really not looking forward to lung cancer. So I'm going to stop smoking and start hitting the gym.
Yeah. And one of the most efficient ways to get to where you want to go in life is to unburden yourself. Because right now, a lot of people walk around with anchors dragging around.
Dropping anchor, yeah.
Yep. They don't realize it because they have something stuck up inside of them. They have things that they have not gone through, allowed themselves to heal from, and that creates an anchor.
So what about the guys who, I've been here in the state before, fancy terms again, anhedonic. Hedonism is like, anhedonic means you just can't feel joy. And I think there's this fear of like, well, I don't know where I want to go, because even if I picked a goal, what if I wouldn't be happy when I got there? Or like I could pick any goal. Like, I'd love to get a mansion, have a car, travel the world in a yacht, whatever you want to call it. But then this fear of like, yeah, but what if it's not enough? It's almost like future casting, like what your goals are, and if are they big enough, are they too small? What do you really want out of life? Whatever it may be.
I can't promise you that when you get to that object in life, getting the gold, getting the gold medal, getting the yacht, getting that, I can't promise that's going to fulfill you. All I can promise you is that your journey towards it and the work towards, if you feel like you are living that out and you are putting the work to let yourself unburden yourself, to heal yourself, to progress yourself and improve, that I can promise you will make you feel as if every day getting to that day will be the best. And so when that day comes, it will just be another good day.
Yeah, and so even within that, this is the funny. We talked a second ago about the emotions and things like that, and how you need a sufficiently big emotional stimulus to really change, but also what a heavy emotional stimulus does is it creates memories, both good and bad. It's like, as long as it's big enough, you can remember times you laughed so hard you almost peed your pants with your friends.
Yeah.
You can also remember the time you cried so hard you thought you were going to die because something tragic happened. It's like people go like, I can remember exactly that one time in 5th grade when I tripped and fell in my shoes, but I can't remember what the hell I ate for breakfast yesterday. It's like, yeah, because that 5th grade thing was really emotionally stimulating, but the breakfast was just another day. It's just breakfast, whatever. And so this kind of ties into a lot of men going on autopilot, in that they're not doing things that are emotionally stimulating, or they can't feel the emotions that they're getting.
Yeah.
And therein lies a problem, that they feel like nothing. This is where anhedonia kind of stems from a little bit. It's like nothing's satisfying, nothing's fun. Why not? Because I can't feel anything. Either I'm not letting myself feel it, or I literally physically can't, because I've disconnected from my emotional body so significantly. But even future casting, it's like, well, what if it's not fun? It's like, you want to make sure you're doing things that are emotionally stimulating enough that it's going to create memories. And that's really where, like, when you can then, this ties a little bit into things like my personal distaste for social media, is the idea that it's like, whenever I see my cousins nowadays, it's like, oh, what have you been up to? Like, oh, I saw everything on Facebook. I already know everything you've done. There's nothing to really talk about. But back in the day, it was like, go have adventures and then come back and then we'll talk about it. And if you didn't have any good stories, you didn't do anything emotionally stimulating. So it's almost like, if you really want to have good stories and have like a life worth living, it's because you have a lot of good stories. If you have a lot of good stories, because you did a lot of emotionally stimulating things. You let yourself feel those things along the way. It's like, I have amazing stories of times I had, like, laughed so hard I cried, amazing stories I was terrified beyond belief, amazing stories of when I was sad, tragic shit, but then something happy happened afterwards, and all this stuff. But it's like, all of that involves you feeling, experiencing an emotional stimulus of some sort. And when guys go into like, oh, I just go to work, come home, watch Netflix, like, you turn to autopilot and then you watch 10 years, 15, 20 years pass you by.
Yeah.
And you're like, what happened? It's like, because you didn't do anything to step out of your comfort zone. You didn't step out into your emotional body at all.
I had a side point. Now I can't think of it.
Take your time.
Come back.
I
It'll
can
come
always
back.
edit these parts out. It's all good.
One point, it connects earlier to what you were talking about. Like, somebody says, I can't experience something.
Anhedonic.
It's more, I'm curious, that kind of person too, because there's also another component to it. If that person has become so disassociated from their own body because of something highly traumatic, and I do use that dramatic with a capital T, happened at such an early childhood. And whether
big T and little t. Well, we'll cover both of those in a sec.
This is the big T.
Big T, okay.
That it literally had to force them to disconnect. And so emotions can't be felt. And a lot of times you find those kind of people doing extreme sports, extreme things, extreme harshness to their body just to feel something.
Kind of like chasing the dragon.
Yeah. So that can happen as well. And that takes a different level of work to connect. And your work is highly needing to connect to the body. So that was just one point I wanted to make as part of that.
So in those cases, with those types of, well, in this case, we're talking about men, what are then the steps we might start to work with those guys?
The component that would be best, it's going to be a long process. You're going to need a lot of trying to drop into the body, trying to have somebody work with you to feel what's there. And it's going to take time, because for so long you were completely disconnected. And you could even take some more, you could do more drug-induced therapy. Those types of things can also work. I'm not promoting it. I'm also not denying it. So I have to make that disclaimer.
Go do ayahuasca.
And I'm also not the person to be that kind of work for that deep of level. Because there's, when it comes to that level of disconnection, you do need to take some bigger actions when it comes to that.
Okay, so if you're traumatized, do drugs. Got it. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I remember I had a patient. I won't go into super detail, but long story short, they had a history of like traumatic experiences involving sexual misconduct. And she was a woman. She was married, And I remember she told me everything. We talked in detail about the whole trauma thing, dissociation, processing, healing, and whatnot. And one thing was interesting, and I kind of did like a bit of light coaching with her, kind of encouraging her to. And this is the same thing for any guys that are listening. Is it like we'll talk? It's like tends to be that the resistance is where you want to go. Like it's kind of like a red neon sign saying like there's something here you need to address. And one thing she did not like was soft, slow, cuddly, sensual intimacy. She hated it. She felt like she was going to throw up every time it started. For her, it was like, if we're going to be, engaging sexually, I want it to be fucking rough and aggressive, and like, like just like maybe there's a time and place for that. Fair enough, but the opposite of like, it would literally make her like revolt and convulse of like, ugh, don't like give me soft kisses and hugs. It's just gross. And I told her, like, that's actually part of your healing because realistically, that should be part of a healthy romantic relationship. But because you had been through so much you've been through, you now associate any kind of intimacy as like aggressive. Like, it has to be aggressive. That's all I've ever experienced. To the point that, like, soft, cuddly, slow, I love you, I care about you, I'm going to hold you, just like your body's like, well, no. But then therein, the problem I made a point to her was like, that's kind of what you have to do in part of your healing process. It's like with your partner and say like, oh, listen, I can only handle 15 seconds and then I got to take a breather. And then maybe next time 30 seconds, and then maybe 40 seconds, and then a minute and a half, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Because it was important to her husband. They're like, I should really enjoy this part. I enjoy this, like, soft, slow, tender kind of stuff. But in that regard, even with people who are like in a kind of traumatized state, it's like recognizing like, what speed are you going at right now?
Mm-hmm.
What speed is like, I'm used to going 90. Totally normal. Why wouldn't you be going 90 all the time, 24/7? It's like, there's different speeds you could go at. But when you slow down or you speed up, all of a sudden you get this freak out response, and it tends to be associated with whatever the trauma was. And sometimes like spending time in that space is part of the healing process. Like, yeah.
I mean, that is definitely something when that kind of trauma happens. That's a big disassociation with the body. I don't want to feel what's happening to me right now.
Yeah.
And, when things start to slow down or that kind of thing, I can see that reaction because it is I need, to feel. And some of the best things that might help is going to something highly somatic workshop or something like that to slowly reintegrate with your body.
Mm-hmm.
Like literally probably something around like even just as simple as putting your hand on your heart or doing breath exercises is a very light version of it. So you can try to just start to feel a little bit. And then it can progress from there from different somatic-based therapies that are out there too. So that might be something beneficial to look into.
Mm-hmm.
But for somebody in that kind of case, it's going to be it's going to be a long healing process.
Yeah. And then the flip side of what we're talking about was little t trauma.
Mm-hmm.
That dissociation and stonewalling and shutdown can happen, even if in the case of like, you didn't have to have a traumatic car accident or vicious beatings, something like that, whatever it may be, like something crazy that happened to you. It could also just flat out be like, every day your dad just ignored you, your mom just berated you, your boss at work was a psycho, whatever it meant, like complex PTSD, essentially. And in that, recognizing that like you might have certain dissociations or shutdown mechanisms that might be due to environmental conditions that no longer exist, but you are still convinced they do on some level, and recognizing and giving yourself some space and acknowledgments for like that's happening in the first place. I see this a lot with guys when they encounter like a woman, if they're married, so like heterosexual guys married to a woman, and there's emotional turmoil going on in the form of like a conflict. There's an argument. She's just had a bad day and she just wants to vent, and it's just, I can't. I don't know. I don't like this. It makes me feel uncomfortable. But you don't recognize it's making you feel uncomfortable for whatever reason, and you just kind of go, bye, gotta go. I'm gonna go work on my stuff in the car in the shop and do my own thing by myself over here. Now I'm just gonna go over there. Or she's talking to you and she's like, she needs you to connect, and you're not there. taking the time to just sit with that feeling of emotion, because it's really alarm bells going off in your head saying like something's wrong, I don't know how to fix it, I don't know if I can fix it, and just giving yourself the permission and space to just like slowly sit with that discomfort of being in the presence of somebody who's having an emotionally disruptive time and letting them go through it peacefully, or engaging with it if it's like an argument or something that needs to be settled. Yeah. We'll sweep it under the rug. It's okay. We'll worry about that tomorrow. I'm like, yeah, tomorrow's never going to happen. It's going to keep happening over and over again. I had a long day at work every single day for the past 10 years. I still don't want to talk about it. I'm like, yeah, it's not going to help. Yeah. Thinking. We're at an hour and a half.
We're at our long pause. Let's see. Where else? We talked quite a bit. There were a lot of fields.
Here's a thought. It's like if you have somebody, if you recommend to anybody who might be listening to this, you have somebody in your life who, or you know somebody who has somebody in their life who they know like there's a problem there. There's like they have issues. But they don't want to talk about it. It's kind of getting worse. It's compounding. What is your personal recommendation for like getting them to just approach it and start to talk about it and start to like be okay with seeking help, especially as a guy? Women are pretty good with going to seek therapy. Guys are just like, no, I'm fine. I'll be fine. I'll just hold my breath until I die emotionally. I'll be fine.
The one way I can think of is lead by example. And
it's a good one.
Do that yourself. Start the work yourself. And they'll see you change. And they'll wonder.
The curiosity circuitry coming back again.
Especially somebody who's highly resistant. And
change of phrase, protective, defensive.
Yep.
What are they trying to protect? Yeah.
Exactly. And you start to change your conversations with them. And you're going to probably hit defensive areas. As you start to share, they might call you weak, or they might call you, stupid for going to this and that. But just keep going through with it, reinforce it, and show them that their words on that doesn't affect you like it probably would be affecting them.
I heard this the other day, and I thought it was fantastic. It was big mistake people make is we judge ourselves by our intentions, but we judge others by their actions. And so what might happen is the intention is I want to help the person so I feel good. But then I tell the person, hey, you can seek advice by doing this and this and this, and they don't do it. And you think, well, what the fuck? They must not care. They must not be interested. They must not, When in reality, it's like they're still working through a lot of defensiveness or resistance themselves. Like they want to, partly, but don't beat them up or attack them for not seeking help or getting perspective or things like that. I see this a lot with some of the women that I work with and their husbands or their spouses, and it's just like he doesn't want to. Like I've tried, he doesn't want to. I'm like, I'd be willing he does. He just has a mountain of fear and resistance and societal programming and like childhood stuff from his dad telling him suck it up and his mom telling him don't cry, boys don't cry, whatever it is, sitting on top of that urge to be like, actually, I would like someone to talk to you about this kind of stuff. It would make me feel a little better. And when you have compassion for that fact that if they haven't talked to a therapist or a coach their entire life, and they're just, it's more just like letting it sink in slowly, planting a seed. Put it out there and be like I'm here. That the thought is here when you're ready. And sometimes it'll take them a couple weeks, couple months. Yeah. Like we see with Connor's stuff, the men's alliance, like a lot of lurkers, a lot of guys who are just like kind of sitting on the fringe. Like I could see, I'm interested. I could see it from a distance, but I don't know if I really want to go over there yet. I feel a little bit nervous. And it's like option A is be preemptive about it and take care of it in a healthy way. And option B is wait till something explodes. And a lot of guys like to wait till something explodes.
Yeah. But one thing too, point of if you're bringing it up, someone or bring it up, thinking of a wife bringing it up to her husband, it's how you bring it up too.
Yes.
If you're just saying you need to go see a therapist, kind of sounds
accusatory.
Like tax cost shutdown. Now, if you say, I noticed that you had these kind of things that you might be wanting to work on, or that, I know a therapist could help with, would you consider seeing one? Now, of course, it's a different phrase, different way of saying it. Say, honey, I love you, but you need to go see a therapist. But it's just thinking about the way that you also go at it. trying to get somebody to seek help or to just open up and talk. I know that's a lot of both what you and I do when we coach is we have to be very tactful in how we phrase things because the way that we phrase something could trigger something.
And sometimes
it's
that's
also,
gonna be intentional too.
exactly. I was just gonna get it also, instills curiosity. So, for instance, if somebody comes back with a violent attack, seek curiosity into it. Say, well, why do you think you're so anti-therapist? Like, where do you think that's coming from? Why is that your instant reaction? Why, was that society telling you that? Was that something your father told you not to do? That, we don't ever seek help? Look where he's at. I'm sure he's not in a good state. That was an assumption, but but I'm guessing if you're being trained to never seek help, never open up, never do that, I'm going to guess that it's probably not a good situation. So those are the things to consider and think about.
It's funny you mentioned the phrasing, the wording thing, and I have somebody I'm working with now, and there's a lot going on. They're just they have a lot going on in their head around a particular situation, and they've been texting me a lot, and I texted him back and I said, listen, reality is whatever will happen, and you'll be okay. And I immediately texted him. I was like, well, I feel like you're saying that. I'm kind of like, that doesn't sound like things are going to go the way I want them to. But now that I'm thinking about it, I realize like that's actually my own negativity talking. I'm like, that's exactly why I said that. That's exactly why I said it the way I did. Like you kind of have to, there is a certain degree of healthy awareness over how much of your thoughts are your own versus like, is there something external going on? It's like you said before, is it your father? Is it your mother? Is it society? Is it the culture? Where does that cutoff land between how much of what you should be able to be authentic versus, being part of a bigger collective of people in a healthy way? But being curious and not being accusatory and attacking it, it's a big one. A lot of people kind of go into like this egocentric self-defense mode, I would say.
Yeah.
That it's like, they're doing it because they're trying to piss me off. This is a very good one. It's you ever see The Dadvocate?
No, I haven't.
She's a woman on YouTube, and she's been like the advocate for dads, the Dadvocate. Very funny, and she does all this short form content about like it's responding to people who are just doing like the toxic masculinity, and she kind of like does the opposite side of explaining things in a male friendly way. And she talks about this thing. She had this concept she referred to it as sink cup, and what happened was her husband kept leaving a cup like on the edge of the sink that wasn't like going to be clean, but it was like possibly he might have to use it again. And for a while, she's like, he's doing this maliciously. He's doing it to piss me off because he knows it's like, I like to keep the area clean. And he's too lazy to just open the freaking dishwasher. And then one day she was like, she had a glass of water, she drank it, and she's like, I could put this in the dishwasher, or I could also leave it out in case I have to refill it again if I want to drink more water. God, my husband is a genius. And it's just recognizing like is this thing going on in the environment like something malicious or something you just don't fully understand? Curiosity, rather than saying like, what are you doing this for? Why am I feeling this? What's going on? Why would you say that? It's like, why did you say that? I'm actually curious. Like, what are you trying to allude to here? Yeah.
In the form, yeah, I think it's just more taking curiosity with things and understanding. We all have triggers. We all have things that we do, or
curiosity and compassion with yourself is a big one. I tell people it's like when you're working through anxious attachment or avoidant attachment, and you have a flare up, and you kind of get through it, and you look back at what happened. Don't attack yourself for having had it happen. Give yourself compassion to be like, oh, this system developed itself because it was trying to protect me at some point.
Yeah.
Your brain doesn't generate systems and behaviors because it hates you. It's like its sole job is to keep you alive at all costs, and it's convinced this will keep you alive. This is healthy for you. This is safe for you. Yeah. Even if it's not healthy.
Yeah. This is what I knew. So let me place this guardian here. So when this happens again, we'll take a different kind of action or shut down or do something different.
Yeah. And I remember someone was talking about this. It's like you have to give yourself the compassion to fumble through a little bit this process with emotions and whatnot. as though you were watching a child learn to walk for the first time.
Mm.
Because it's very like you're never going to see a little baby trying to walk and they fall 3 times and you're like, you know what, walking's not for you. Just start crawling for the rest of your life. If you try it 3 times, you're not going to get it. I think the estimation was like they're going to fall on their butt like a minimum of like 500 times before they really start to get it. Maybe like 1,000 before it's really clean.
Yeah.
But same thing with like emotions and relationships and, you know, working through old traumas and behaviors and whatnot. It's like you're going to fumble, but you're going to fall backwards a couple times. And that's okay. Totally fine.
Yeah. I mean, I know something recently I was working with a person and it's through their childhood, you know, they felt they were sick a lot and other components of their life too was causing a lot of pain. And so, you know, your initial reaction might be, well, I'm just trying to avoid pain in my life. But in reality, I was able to flip it and say, well, actually, are you asking yourself that I need to feel pain to be alive, to exist? And that's my narrative right now in this motion, my, you know, bundle of nerves I was as a little kid.
Yeah, that's kind of what we talked about earlier about like a particular speed you're going at, and chasing thrills, chasing big, you know, hits of exciting things. But it can be that, you know, you're so used to going at, I said before, like 90 miles an hour, that it feels really weird to not be going at 90 miles an hour. This is the way I see a lot of sometimes in relationships where people will, when things are going good, they'll freak out. Because they're just so used to nothing going right, or relationships by a certain point exploding in a certain way. And then when things go well, it's like, I'm waiting for the shoe to drop. Why isn't it dropped yet? When's it going to drop? It has to drop sooner or later. You know what? I'm going to make it drop. And then they blow it up and they're like, ah, there it is. See, told you it was going to happen. Like, yeah, because you did it yourself. You didn't realize you were trying to replay a subconscious pattern that you were just so used to seeing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where can we find your content?
So you can find me at thegroundedwarrior.com. That's a good place. Also, Grounded Warrior on Instagram is also a place I post content, some content, and other ways to also find me too.
Awesome. Phil, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.